The smell of cheap hotel disinfectant hit me as I pushed open the door to room 309. My heart pounded in my chest, every beat screaming at me to turn back. But I couldn't. Not after what I'd seen on the GPS tracker. Inside, the scene stopped me cold. Emily, my wife of 8 years, was tangled in the sheets with her boss, Mike. They didn't notice me at first, too caught up in each other. Then Emily looked up and froze, her face draining of color. "James?" she whispered, pulling the blanket around her. Mike didn't flinch. He stood up, half-dressed, glaring at me like I was the intruder. "What the hell are you doing here?" he barked. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. My wife, my Emily, was with him. The man she'd said was just a work mentor. It didn't start with something big. At first, it was little things. Emily laughing at her phone more than usual or staying late at work without calling. "You're imagining things," I told myself. She was my wife. We had a good marriage, didn't we? But the unease grew. One night, I saw her texting at midnight, her face lit by the glow of her phone. When I asked her who it was, she said, "Just work stuff. Go back to sleep." I tried to believe her. But the next morning, I saw the smile she gave her phone, a smile I hadn't seen her give me in months. The first undeniable clue came 2 weeks later. I was looking for my car keys and ended up rummaging through her purse. That's when I found the receipt. It was from a fancy steakhouse 2 cities away. $200 for 2 meals. "Business dinner," she said when I confronted her. Mike and I had to meet with a client. She sounded so convincing, but I noticed how her hand trembled as she poured her coffee. After that, I started paying closer attention. Her explanations didn't add up. Why did she need to work late? Every Friday? Why was her phone always on silent? One night, I asked her if everything was okay between us. She looked surprised, almost defensive. "Of course," she said. "Why would you even ask that?" But her eyes darted to her phone, and I saw her shoulders tense. By the time she told me she had a work trip out of town, I couldn't take it anymore. Something was wrong, and I needed proof. When she left, I slipped a GPS tracker into the pocket of her car's driver's side door. It was old and a bit clunky, but it still worked. I told myself I wouldn't check it unless I really had to. But the moment she pulled out of the driveway, I couldn't help it. I opened the app and watched her little dot move down the highway. The tracker led me to a city an hour away. I parked a few blocks from her hotel and waited. It was the longest 2 hours of my life. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe it really was just a work trip. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then I saw her car parked outside a boutique hotel. The kind of place you don't go for business. I walked into the lobby, my hands sweating. The receptionist glanced at me, but I kept my head down. I heard her voice. Emily was at the check-in counter, laughing with someone. I peeked around the corner and saw her with Mike. My chest tightened as I heard the room number, 309. I didn't want to believe it. But deep down, I already knew. I went back to my car and grabbed a baseball cap and sunglasses. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I couldn't just walk away. I waited until the elevator dinged and saw them step inside. I slipped in after them, staying a few steps behind. When they disappeared into room 309, I stood in the hallway, staring at the door. My whole body was shaking. I don't know how long I stood there. A part of me wanted to leave, to pretend this wasn't happening. But my legs moved on their own. I knocked once, then turned the knob. It wasn't locked. The sight of them together was like a punch to the gut. Emily screamed. Mike cursed and got to his feet. "What the hell are you doing here?" Mike demanded, pulling on his pants. I couldn't think straight. "You," I said, pointing at Emily. "How could you?" Emily started crying, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or fear. Mike took a step toward me, his fists clenched. "You're pathetic," Mike sneered. "She doesn't love you anymore. Get over it." I lost it. I lunged at him, swinging wildly. We crashed into the bedside table, and I heard Emily screaming. Before I knew it, Mike grabbed a heavy lamp and swung it at my head. Everything went dark. When I woke up, my head throbbed and my wrists were tied together. I was lying in the trunk of a car, every bump on the road jarring my aching body. The voices up front were muffled but loud enough to recognize. Emily and Mike. "I can't believe we're doing this," Emily said, her voice trembling. "Do you want him to go to the cops?" Mike snapped. "We don't have a choice." Tears stunned my eyes as I realized what was happening. They thought I was dead or close enough, and now they were getting rid of me. The car stopped. I felt rough hands grabbing me, dragging me out. The night air was cold against my skin, but the chill was nothing compared to the terror in my chest. "Just push him in," Mike said. "Wait," Emily whispered. "Are you sure?" "Do it." The next thing I knew, I was falling. The water hit me like ice, shocking my body awake. My lungs screamed as I sank, the weight of the ropes dragging me down. I don't know how long I was in the river. At some point, the ropes loosened, and I kicked my way to the surface. The current carried me downstream, where I finally hit something solid, a boat. A man's voice called out, "Hey, you okay?" A fisherman, wide-eyed and frantic, pulled me aboard. He wrapped me in a blanket and called for help. The next time I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. My head was bandaged, and my body felt like it had been through a meat grinder. 2 police officers stood at the foot of the bed. One of them, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, leaned forward. "Can you tell us what happened?" he asked. I told them everything. Emily, Mike, the hotel, the river. My voice cracked as I spoke, but I didn't leave anything out. The officers didn't seem surprised. "We've dealt with cases like this before," one of them said, "but we're going to need evidence." They left to check the hotel's surveillance cameras. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night over and over in my head. The next day, the police came back with good news. The hotel cameras had caught Emily and Mike carrying me out. It was all there. Me unconscious, the 2 of them loading me into the car. "That's enough to make arrests," the officer said. I wasn't there when they arrested Emily, but I heard later that she cried the entire time. She begged the officers to believe she didn't want to hurt me, that it was all Mike's idea. But the evidence was damning. She had helped him, no matter what her reasons were. Emily broke down during her interrogation. She admitted everything, how her affair with Mike had started, how they'd panicked after I showed up at the hotel, and how they'd thought killing me was their only way out. Mike, on the other hand, denied everything. "I didn't hit him," he claimed. "Emily's lying to save herself." The trial was a circus. Reporters filled the courtroom, and the story made headlines. Husband survives wife and lover's murder plot. I sat in the front row every day, watching as Emily and Mike took turns trying to pin the blame on each other. After weeks of testimony, the jury came back with their decision. "Guilty," the foreperson said, first for Mike, then for Emily. Emily sobbed as the judge read the sentence. Life in prison for both of them. Mike sat stone-faced, refusing to look at anyone. I thought I'd feel relieved, but sentencing day was bittersweet. Emily had betrayed me in the worst way, but she'd also been someone I loved. Watching her being led away in handcuffs wasn't as satisfying as I'd imagined. The weeks after the trial were strange. Strangers stopped me on the street, recognizing me from the news. "You're so strong," they said. But I didn't feel strong. I felt hollow. I sold the house we'd shared and moved to a small apartment across town. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of her, of what she'd done. The story didn't fade as quickly as I'd hoped. True crime podcasts picked it up, calling it The Betrayal in Room 309. Hearing my life turned into entertainment was surreal. I stopped checking social media after a while. The comments were too much, some sympathetic, others cruel. It took months before I started feeling like myself again. I found a new job, made new friends, and started focusing on the future. People told me I was brave for surviving, but I didn't feel brave. I just felt lucky to be alive. Therapy was hard at first. Talking about Emily, about the river, about everything, made it all feel real again. But slowly it helped. "Your story didn't end in that river," my therapist said. "It's just beginning." About a year after everything, I met someone new. Her name was Rachel, and she was different from anyone I'd ever known. Kind, honest, and patient. I told her about my past on our 3rd date. She listened without judgment and told me she admired my strength. One day I decided to visit Emily in prison. I didn't know why, but part of me needed to see her. She looked older, thinner. When she saw me, she started crying. "I'm sorry," she said. "I never wanted it to end like this." I nodded but didn't say anything. I left without looking back, feeling lighter than I had in years. Now I share this story not for pity but as a warning. Trust can be shattered in an instant, and betrayal can come from the person you least expect. But I also share it to say this: No matter how dark things get, there's always a way forward. You just have to find it. Please support our channel by giving this video a thumbs up. Also subscribe and turn on the bell notification so that you will be the first to be notified when we post another video like this one. And watch this next interesting video on our channel.